Now, it might just be me, but I never really thought about how ideas were formed. Usually they just pop into my head, usually while I'm sitting at the first and throw. But why? And why is it that some people can look at the same exact idea and consider it good or bad? I don't know what this video will prove, but I just hope I can take you on a semi-interesting yap session. Alright, so I should probably try and define what we're trying to find out. So, what is an idea? Okay, so a formative thought or opinion. Okay, so what is a thought then? Thought, an idea or a... Well, they didn't give much information, so I'll just... What is an idea? Well, an idea is a thought. Okay, so what is that? Well, you do it by thinking. Yeah, but what are you doing while thinking? Yeah, I got no idea. Yeah, well, what don't you have? What is the thing? So, I've decided to take this quest upon myself to try and figure out what an idea is. And I think talking about an idea in a neurological sense might be the simplest. Alright, so obviously I don't have a degree in neurology, but I do have a residency in yapology and resonomics. So I'm sure I can talk about this and make it make somewhat sense at least. So, as I'm sure you know, in your head, there's a brain, and that brain is rather big if you're subscribed to this channel.
This is big brain time.
But in that pretty mind of yours, there are little footnotes of information, or neurons. These each hold tiny tidbits of information, like grass is green or something very, very, very simple. Now these nodes can connect with each other using a path, conveniently named a neural pathway.
Trust me, daddy.
Now, when you have all of these nodes and you connect them with paths, you form a little node town, or how the nerds would call it, a neurological network. Here, all the nodes will compile all the information together, and you get a coherent memory or thought. Alright, with me so far? Still watching this video? Good, hit the like when you're at it. Okay, but how does it work that you can recall this information? Well, I don't know, but this is my best guess. Essentially, the action of you thinking is you electrifying these thingamajiggies. You send a little electrical card that zooms down the neural pathway, collecting the information stored in the network, and you're experiencing that as thinking.
Okay, but Korn, how does my brain produce electricity?
Well... This shit was very chemistry-y, and I suck at chemistry, so bear with me here. Alright, so simply at rest, the inside of your neuron is negatively charged relative to the outside. The outer membrane of these neurological paths have little gates for ions to come in and out of. The main two gates being sodium and potassium channels. So when this membrane gets stimulated, it opens up the sodium channels, and this results in the neuron becoming positively charged, aka depolarizing it. That in turn makes the potassium channels open and shoving all of the potassium ions that were inside the neuron in the beginning, resulting in the neuron becoming repolarized and becoming even more negative than during the resting state. Hyperpolarization is like a cooldown, where the neuron has to reload and become ready to pass through a future stimulus. A sodium-potassium pump essentially acts like a cleanup crew, returning the potassium in and shoving the sodium out, returning the neuron to its original resting baseline state. This whole cycle stimulates the neuron next to it, which in turn stimulates the neuron next to it, and essentially that's how like the electricity moves forward. And it's like electricity, but more convoluted. So if you have any questions, please refrain from asking them. Okay, cool, so now we know what a thought is, how it's stored, and how it moves. But like, what starts it? How does it get there? Well, two main ways. Way number one is just through your senses. Your eyes see something, and that input of sight is sent through your nerves into some deep dark corner of the brain. But most likely the information you just received through your eyes was completely useless, and therefore will be stored in some buttfuck nowhere corner of your brain, never to be seen again. You know that feeling when you're reading something, you know, you have your eyes over it, you read every single word, but then you realize, wait, what the fuck did I just read? And you have no idea? Yeah, that's kind of what just happened. You got the input, but your brain didn't consider it important enough to store in an easy to access place, so it just kind of shoved it somewhere you don't consciously know where. Now, here comes the cool part. Even though you cannot really access that information on command, when someone asks you about it, you might just spontaneously remember. Even though you cannot access that information on command, when someone asks you about it, you might intuitively know the answer. And that might be because that question stimulated the same path your brain took to store this information. Now, for the second way of thoughts forming, it's way more conscious. You are actually able to kind of magically force a neuron to activate. How? I don't know. Moving on. Let's say you have two pre-existing node towns. One with the information about what a suit is, and another one with the information about what a penguin is. Now you can consciously try to connect these two different towns, and essentially what you did is thought about something you never have thought about before, and therefore kind of imagined a new thought. Well, aren't you just brilliant? A penguin in a suit. You have to tell everybody about this completely revolutionizing idea of penguins and suits. Only there is a slight problem. Millions of other people probably have already thought about this. So your brilliant, amazing, and original idea isn't so brilliant and original after all. But why is that? It was so new to you, you have never thought this way, so why did everyone else? Well, the way you use your brain might be the problem. Dumbass. No, but really, the way you think might be the problem. Imagine you and your friend have a memory of the time you went swimming together. Since the memory is fresh, you might recall a lot of detail about it. Sending the electric cord down the pathways, you're able to remember all the parts of the memory. But over the years, you maybe start to forget some parts or simply recall some part more fondly than the other. And you start to send that electrical cord, remembering that one memory in that one specific way. Over countless repetitions of you following this one exact path, using the one specific way of thinking, the other paths between the neurons become weaker and weaker, essentially resulting in you losing the connection between them, aka forgetting them. So a couple years later, when you and your friend meet up and start reminiscing about the same memory, it's very possible that you remember the exact same thing in two different ways, because you two took two different paths when remembering this memory. And only when your friend is able to point out all the things you forgot, you are able to re-establish the connection between the neurons and re-remember them. It's kind of like that, oh yeah, that happened moment. Now back to your penguins. Just because your dumbass brain never thought about the idea to explore the path between suits and penguins, doesn't mean it's a completely new and revolutionary idea. It might be revolutionary to you, because you never thought about it that way, but that link isn't really that hard to make, and therefore it was possible for millions of other people to do before you. So how does one make that new, completely revolutionary idea? Well, it's impossible to define a good or bad idea, since the terms good and bad are completely broad. You might think it's a good idea to put jelly on a hot dog, but it might just mean you have shit taste. So instead, let me help you make your ideas more original. Or what they mean in this case is, you make it less likely that someone else has already thought about this before. Your brain clumps things that are together alike. For example, animals will get their desired boxed head there, colors there, geopolitical ideas over there. So you can increase your chances of being original by connecting seemingly unconnectable networks in your brain. So let us think, color plus geopolitical ideologies, racism. Oh. Have you noticed how most people think in the exact same way? We often talk about reinforcement learning and programming when we think about AI. Like, you show it pictures of faces and then it's suddenly able to generate new faces based on the information you gave it. That makes sense, but I think a lot of people forget that this is exactly how your brain works. If you watch Vsauce, you might be familiar with the Einstein effect, which shows that you can program a brain to be stupid. The experiment which proved this typically involved 3 jugs with capacities like 3 liters, 5 liters and 8 liters. The goal was always to measure out a specific volume, let's say 4 liters, using only those jugs. Now here's where the cool part comes into play. Over a couple trials, people were conditioned to use a quite inefficient formula using all 3 jugs. It went somewhat like this. Let's say to get 4 liters, they were pouring 5 liters in the 3 liter jar, then pouring the 2 remaining jars into 8. Then pour 5 liters into the 3 jar, then the 2 remaining into 8. Then boom, you have 4 liters. Perfect. That's logical, right? Now, this exact formula was done over and over and over again. After countless repetitions of this, their brain was primed. Their neural pathways were locked into this formula. So then, the scientists asked them to measure out 6 liters. Of course, you know what they did? They did the same thing. They took 5 minus 3, then 2 into the 8. Then 5 minus 3, that leaves 4 in the 8. Then 5 minus 3, that leaves 6. Easy, right? Wrong. You're looking at this with your fresh, unconditioned mind with no predetermined pathway stake, might suggest just using the 3-liter jar twice. Yeah, that's perfect, that leaves 6 liters. But nobody who was conditioned thought about doing that. Your fresh, unlearned brain was better programmed to take the more efficient route, because you didn't have an established pathway to always take. Now, even when the participants were shown the simpler solution after struggling with the problem, some still found it difficult to abandon their original approach and adopt the new, better method. They got so used into thinking this pre-programmed way, their neural path was so beaten in that they couldn't take a different one. Now, think about this in a bigger scale. If you and someone lived in the exact same way, went to the exact same school, had the exact same friends, would that make you more likely to think in the exact same way too? When I first started researching psychology, I thought that CBT, no, not cock and ball torture, cognitive behavior therapy, was bullshit. How could it be possible that just talking to someone and like examining your own thoughts would change how you feel? Like, you're depressed? That's some deep shit. What do you mean just talking with that? But after realizing this, behavioral therapy made so much more sense. If you are thinking in a negative way over and over again, and just beating the same path in and in again, the better one, the more positive path, might seem impossible. But now seeing the neural pathways in action and how they impact our daily lives, unless you're consciously thinking about the way you think, you're very likely to end up in the same thinking patterns over and over again. So how can we make our brain make new paths easier? If you have immigrant parents like me, you might recognize this. My mom used to tell me that learning the language is hard and I'm lucky that I'm a kid so I can learn fast. Now, at the time I was just like, yeah, sure, just learn better. But now I realize, damn, I was a dumb kid. There is definitive proof that kids learn faster. But why? Remember when I told you that reusing the same neurological path is easier than creating a new one? Well, what happens if you don't even have a path to start with? Well, you're forced to create some. Neuroplasticity, from the Greek word meaning plastos, aka form molding or modeling. Neuroplasticity describes the brain's ability to switch between neural pathways and create new ones, aka a higher neuroplasticity means you're better at doing that. And what do you know? It's at its peak during the first 5 years of life and then it starts to exponentially drop off as you age. Kids have it easier learning languages because their brains are more susceptible to laying down these new language pathways.
Hola, ¿cómo estás, Shirley? What do you say?
And this is why kids are often labeled as creative. They are more open, thinking outside the box, because they essentially have better hardware with less limitations. Now, this isn't always good, since sometimes a creative original answer is still plain stupid. Like if you ask a kid what's 5 plus 5 and they answer tomato, they aren't a outside the box thinking genius, they're kind of stupid. Okay, but can we regain this creativity and neuroplasticity as adults? Well, a normal degradation in neuroplasticity is unavoidable. But excess degradation leads to illnesses such as Alzheimer's and others neuroderogatory disorders. But it's shown that you can halt this neural degradation with mental training and such. Although, don't get your hopes up. There is no real proof that you can significantly improve your neuroplasticity through any normal means. But how about unnormal means? This is insanely fresh and still ongoing research, but ketamine is shown to heavily promote neuroplasticity. So if you want to, just shoot up some ket and you'll be a super intelligent superhuman in no time. Talking behind the actual process of your brain on ketamine, about like the proteins and the genes behind it, is very boring, so it's basically like overclocking your brain, which is kind of cool. But I have a little question for you about AI. I told you that your brain essentially learns the exact same way as an AI does, learning through reinforcement and such. But we use electricity to power our thoughts, and they use electricity to power their computation as well. The more we think about it, what separates us from AI? Is it just that we're smarter? Well, what will that be the case in 20 years? When AI is indistinguishable from human? But I can hear you say,
Well, in the end, they are still a computer.
But okay, what if a scientist developed a biological group that's able to compute information just like an AI? That would be kind of freaky, wouldn't it? Even freakier is that is exactly what your brain is. Alright, so this video took a while to make, so fucking subscribe, you dingus. But yeah, this is a subject that there's a lot more to go on, like, you know, conscious, unconscious thinking, like different parts of the brain. I haven't even started talking about that. So I might do a part 2, but I have different ideas, and this takes a long time. So I don't know. But of course, if y'all comment y'all want this, I will do this one. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.